Hey, welcome to another episode of Reporting Depp v. Heard. We had Johnny Depp on the stand for the entire day today, so it's going to be quite tricky to summarise exactly everything that he said, but I'll try and sort of group it together into themes. It was a very, very busy day at the courthouse today. I was exhausted after last week, so I set my alarm for 5 o'clock, which is a lie-in during this trial. Set my alarm for 5 o'clock this morning, got to my place in the queue at around 20 past 6, and I was number 53 or something. And this rumour went round that they were only going to let 50 people into the main courtroom, and so I spent the next 40 minutes in fear of missing out on getting into the courtroom and seeing the evidence. Thankfully, it was 100 wristbands that they were giving out for the main courtroom, so I made it, but there were far more people than there have been at any stage throughout this trial, because obviously word got around that Johnny was giving evidence and people are turning up on spec. In fact, there were a few attorneys in the queue who work in that building behind me, and they decided that they were going to take a day off work and sit in and watch the evidence themselves. So that was interesting. I might try and get one or two of them on camera later to get their perspective on the trial. My special guest today, though, is a former attorney and court TV presenter, Chanley Painter, who very kindly agreed to a park bench interview. But before that, I'll try and take you through exactly what happened with regard to all the evidence. We had Johnny Depp talking about the insults that Amber Heard would spray in his direction and how they would create these circular arguments which never had any resolution. And that his solution to these arguments, I've just realised I'm standing directly in front of the sun, and if I do 180 degrees, I will squint, but at least you'll be able to see my face. Where were we? Right, so circular arguments that would never have any resolution. So his way of dealing with them eventually, when he realised that he was never going to win, or that they were never going to be able to come to kind of a sensible stop, was by hiding himself away, what he did as a child. And he was very keen to draw that illusion between his childhood and Amber Heard, to the extent that he said, I essentially found out that I'd married my mother, the barrage of psychological and emotional torment that he'd suffered. So that's how it was set up. Then he talks about having children and how he realised his job, once he had his first child, his daughter, was to be a perfect father, or as good a father as he possibly could be. And yet Amber Heard, he says, constantly disparaged his parenting ability. He also then went on to detail the violence that he says she perpetrated against him. Now, we didn't get any of this in the court case in London in 2020. And he went into some detail describing incidents which are well known, but which have never featured Amber Heard being violent towards him. He didn't hold back this time, explaining how she'd roundhoused him, allegedly, how she would come at him slapping him or scratching him, or one time when he tried to stop her hitting him, he put her in a bear hug and she just continued kicking him. And that's how the infamous headbutt incident appeared. She said, "Oh, you broke my nose, you headbutted me." And he was very much of the view that, yes, there may have been some contact between his head and hers, but he didn't break her nose. However, after she'd claimed he'd broken her nose, there was a revelation which I'd never heard before, which was that after she said, "Oh, you've broken my nose, Johnny," she apparently disappeared from the room and then returned 7 or 8 minutes later with a tissue up her nose. And she pulled it out and showed him what she said was blood on the end of the tissue. He, I think by this stage of the relationship, was very suspicious of her, and he said he waited till she left the room and he inspected the tissue which she dropped in the bin, and he said that there was actually nail varnish on the tissue, red nail varnish, rather than blood, which is an allegation and a half. We also dealt with the poo incident. I wondered whether or not to discuss this, but people seem to make a great deal of it, and I think you're going to find it in the New York Post tomorrow. I was speaking to the journalist. He was very alive to the poo incident. Now, this was after their relationship had basically disintegrated in 2016. Johnny Depp had left the penthouse in the Eastern Columbia building where they used to live and was living at his house on Sweetser Avenue in Los Angeles, and he knew that Amber Heard was at Coachella Festival, and so he said to his security, "Why don't we go down to the penthouse and I can just grab some of my stuff, continue to do the process of moving out of the building." And security apparently said to him, no, it's not a good time actually, boss. And he said, no, it's a great time because Amber's at Coachella, so we're not going to run into each other. And he then was shown a photograph of what he describes as human fecal matter, or what he later described as a grumpy, lying on the bed in their penthouse. He thought it was just so out there that he found it funny. But the defence all along has been that this fecal matter was something to do with their two dogs, Pistol and Boo. I can't believe I can remember the name of Johnny Depp's dogs. I'm getting too into this trial. But Johnny was absolutely adamant that these little 4-pound dogs could no way produce the size of the grumpy, which he saw on the photograph shown to him by his security detail. And he said he understood why they didn't want him to potentially go down to the building then. But he did describe the human fecal matter as belonging to Amber Heard in court today. Not quite sure how it's relevant to the case, but it seems to cause a bit of a storm every time it comes up. So there you go. That was the contested grumpy on the... I've never heard that phrase before, it's why I can't stop saying it. But that was that. So what have we done? We've done the arguments, we've done the nail varnish, and we've done the poo. Oh yeah, at the very end of his testimony today, before he was cross-examined in the last 20 minutes of court time, Johnny Depp was asked what effect the article that Amber Heard wrote in the Washington Post had on him, and he talks about it in borderline emotional terms, but he said he'd lost everything. Yet he struggled rather to say exactly what he had lost as a specific result of the article, which is of course what this defamation suit is about. It's not about the evidence that we've heard before. The jury has to make a decision based on the contents of the article, and whilst there very much is an argument for saying, well, they're all wrapped in together, they're all an effect, they're all a cause, they're all tied in with his relationship and the 2016 allegations of domestic violence, on a legal and technical level, there is clearly an argument for separating them out, because for the act of defamation, for the accusation of defamation to succeed, it has to be about the contents of that article. So, when Johnny Depp's cross-examination began this afternoon, that's what the attorney focused on. He said, you're not named in this, apart from this paragraph, which references what happened 2 years ago. It has nothing to do with the previous relationship that you had with Amber Heard. And also, you can't point to anything specific that you have lost as a result of this article. So that set the tone for the way I think the cross-examination is going to go. It was very interesting to see the change in Johnny Depp's demeanour as well when he was being cross-examined. He was quite ponderous and slow and a little hesitant when he was giving evidence from his attorneys, to his attorneys, sorry. But he was much more on the front foot and rebarbative when it came to Ben Rottenborn, Amber Heard's attorney. So we'll see if that style continues into tomorrow. But first, let's debrief the day with Chanley Painter, a very nice lady who is a court TV presenter who joined me on my park bench for a quick interview straight after the close of play. Will you look at this? Who's waiting on the park bench for the park bench interview after the second day of Johnny Depp's evidence? It's Chanley Painter. Chanley, how lovely to have you.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Listen, right, okay, well, let's get into what we've seen over the last 7 hours of evidence. Johnny Depp mainly being examined. We had a little bit of cross-examination at the end, which we'll get to. But detail and revelation, which we didn't even get in the 2020 court case. I mean, a lot of stuff was coming out there, and he was given the time to say it, wasn't he?
Right, which is really unique. That's what stands out to me, is how long he's able to just drone on and on, answer his questions. You know, at times it seems like he's just stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
And maybe he gets around to answering the exact question that was asked of him. But he's given free rein on his direct examination, which I really don't see a lot at all without objections from...
Well, it's a big contrast to the other witnesses, because
Yes.
the other witnesses, you've got the attorneys jumping up and down like Jack in the boxes,
Exactly.
objecting to every other sentence. So I wonder whether they've cut each other a deal, whether we're going to see something similar with Amber Heard.
That's possible. I think we will, but I don't think her answers will be so long, given what we've heard of her on the recordings
Yes.
and whatnot. Very different tone.
Yeah.
But also, it could be strategic in that her team thinks the more the jury hears and sees of Johnny Depp may not be favorable to him. Maybe they're hoping that they don't like him or connect with him or think he is not being completely credible in front of them. So maybe they're not objecting as much because they think their truth will come out more.
Because I haven't seen this side to Johnny Depp before. On the witness, but I mean, he spent 4 days on the stand in the UK, but he was immediately being cross-examined. So, and he does seem a little slower than he was 2 years ago. He was, it felt more sprightly, more energetic, and he was being challenged. And we saw towards the end of the day he was being challenged, and he certainly was more responsive almost to the opposition attorney. So when he was telling his own story, he seemed a bit more ponderous, a bit more unsure of himself, a bit, as you say, rambly. How did he come across to you?
Well, it came across to me thoughtful, because he does have powerful pauses before he answers, which makes you think he's considering what he's saying before he says it.
He's a bright fella, clearly.
Bright
I mean,
fella,
yeah, he's very well read.
Big words,
Yeah.
And his imagery in the choice of words is also powerful, because as he's describing something to the jury, you can picture it.
Yeah.
What he's saying, and that's helpful. That's, he rewrote his movie lines, right? He has a talent and a gift for that, and that's coming across. Now, as far as the jury, I've been trying to glean what they're thinking about him.
Yeah.
And
So you guys can talk about juries in America. Even when Vinny was asking me about what I thought of the jury, I've got this training that kicks in where we can't mention juries,
Right.
we can't even talk about them, we don't get to really see them other than in the witness box. They walk amongst us around this courthouse
they
building.
exited the courthouse.
So how were you reading the jury? Am I allowed to ask this question?
Yes, yes,
How,
yes.
how were you reading the jury?
That is my full-time job. I watch juries almost every day for Court TV, so I feel like if I have a backup career, maybe it's as a jury analyst. But so what surprised me the most yesterday is Johnny Depp is on the witness stand, and they're treating him or reacting to him as if he's any other witness so far in the trial. The same reaction. Nothing overt, serious, occasional notes, no real nodding or anything.
Yeah, there's a lot of, they are quite impassive actually.
Today, I did notice a little shift.
Go on.
So there's the one woman who sits on the front row of the jury box, the only one woman on the front row of the jury box, and she seemed to be a little more empathetic towards him today, in that she would nod when he looked over towards the jury box. She took a little more notes, and she also looked at Amber Heard more often today, maybe to see how she was reacting or taking in some of the things that he said today that were very harsh towards Amber Heard. And so it makes me think maybe he's growing on the jury a little bit.
Right. What did you think of the actual evidence that he gave today about the violence that she's alleged to have committed against him? Again, we didn't get any of this in the UK.
It's so heinous to think if what he is saying is true. I mean, these are vile allegations. It has to be really tough for Amber Heard to sit here if she disagrees with it, or if it indeed is untrue.
There wasn't much head shaking from her. She was pretty much impassive throughout. Same expression. Like I call it the on the verge of tears expression, the trembling lower lip.
Perfect description all day long. And what strength that takes to do that. I know she's a professional actress. This is something.
6 or 7 hours straight holding that same pose, which is clearly something she's decided to do, because she could be doing the shaking and the sarcastic laughing or whatever, But that's what she's decided she's going to present to the world while she hears these allegations.
It's a multi-dimensional expression too that can be read many different ways.
Yeah.
And so I think it's good for her, and that shows her strength in sitting there, because I don't know if I could do that if I was sitting there and someone was saying what he was saying on the stand about her.
But this is the thing, that it is driving that sharp wedge between two completely different versions of reality.
Yes.
And it's making the gap even wider.
Yes.
He is detailing, and he did it in a way that did not seem as if he was making it up. That's probably the sort of most neutral way of putting it. He's an actor, maybe he's acting, I don't know. But it didn't look like he was groping for specific made-up details. He seemed to be calling it as he saw it. Now, that's his reality, which is diametrically opposed to the reality that was presented in the London trial and the reality that I'm sure we're going to get presented during her evidence. It's head-spinning, isn't it? I mean, there's no common ground here.
There's no common ground, so what a job this jury has to try to see what is actually true. Is it somewhere in the middle of each of these sides? Are there points of truth in either story? That's their job. I'm glad it's not my job. But you're so correct in that the way that he's telling this story, he's really painting a picture of himself as a victim.
Yeah.
not just with Amber Heard, but really his entire life. If
Yeah.
you think about what he said about his mother being so abusive to him. And I think it was really masterful for his case to tie in what he went through as a child and his mother to the relationship with Amber Heard.
The running away from the fight, the
Yes.
fact that he said explicitly, I realised I'd married my mother.
Exactly.
Which, you know, people can empathise with that scenario because they, you know,
Exactly. And that's another, the older woman juror. You know, a lot of these jurors are younger. She has more life experience. And I think that's why we see her a little bit more understanding.
Because I think it doesn't matter what we think, does it? It
Right.
just matters what
Yes.
those 7 decision makers are going to decide. And I had a chat with Vinny about this, and I'm still not quite sure where this is going, because they could find for both parties. They could say that both the claim and counterclaim are correct, but then award very little in the way of damages. I mean, have you got any sense of the way that this could play out based on what we've heard so far?
There's many ways that this could play out. They could believe one over the other. They could believe neither party. They could believe both in some way. And that's sort of the advantage with civil court. Criminal is like all or nothing.
Right.
Civil, you can kind of, oh, she's this amount culpable, he's this amount culpable, and reach some sort of we call it kind of split the baby, you know, divvy up the blame between the two. And you can see that unfolding here, especially if they find the truth is somewhere in the middle of these extreme versions of the facts.
And how do they do that with the verdict then? Because because verdicts are pretty hard and fast, aren't they?
So here the verdict, that's another difficulty with this case, because
I'm glad we've got you on, Chanley.
because it's going to be complex. The burden of proof here is on both sides because there's this counter suit that Amber Heard brought. So Johnny Depp has a burden to prove more than 50% that he's right. So if they weigh the scales and they think, okay, 51% in this issue, Johnny Depp, I believe him, then he wins that. Likewise with Amber Heard. Okay, I really believed her on this 51%, so she's good to go.
Go on, there's more.
But there's a little more of a complication because they're public figures, and here for defamation, they have to prove malice, and that's a higher standard than 51%. It has to be a clear conviction that Amber Heard knew what she said was wrong, and she intended for it to defame and for the lie to be told. And that's difficult to prove. And it's a little bit higher. So this jury has to be clearly convinced that she made everything up. This was an entire hoax targeting her ex-husband. And she wrote this op-ed knowing it was untrue that she was a victim of domestic abuse, and inferred him in that article on purpose.
Yes, and as I say, we'll finish on that 20 minutes of cross-examination we had in a moment. Because the thing that we have to keep sight of, and which the jury will be constantly reminded of, is that they're not deciding who was the abuser. They are deciding on the basis of a newspaper article that was written and allegations that were made about Amber Heard in public through other newspaper articles.
They are in a way deciding who was the abuser.
Well, this is the thing. Can they have that deliberation? Can they go, well, okay, Johnny Depp may have been involved in a physical altercation, but he was as much of a victim as she was, therefore I'm finding, but then they can't make that decision to find for them both on that understanding. They have to filter it through the context of the publications of the newspaper articles.
So it's a limited question they find, but they can consider all the context surrounding the limited question. So in whether or not this article defamed Johnny Depp, they do have to sort of decide if she was lying. Was she a victim of domestic abuse or wasn't she?
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does, but it is complicated because it's not straight up and down. And this is what happened in the final 20 minutes of today when we had the cross-examination. Now, you would expect that at 4:40 on a Wednesday afternoon, after a number of grueling hours in the witness box, that the judge and the parties would just say, okay, let's call it a day and we'll start the cross-examination tomorrow. But they are behind, and the judge made that point, you know, time is not on our side. So the cross-examination started in the final minutes of the day. And it became very clear the tack that Ben Rottenborn, Amber Heard's attorney, was taking. he was going straight to the article and making the point that all these allegations that Johnny Depp was making about Amber Heard have nothing to do with this article. Is that a fair summary of where he was going with that?
Yes.
Or is there a wider game plan that I'm missing?
No, I thought it was great, knowing he only had about 20 minutes to pick up where the direct left off. So the direct examination culminated with that article, his thoughts about the article. And so in that limited amount of time, he knew he could target that to begin the cross. And so it was a great starting point. And it got to the heart of the issue, right? Why we're here, which is this article.
Yeah,
So,
which you're not named in. And which
Exactly.
only contains one paragraph,
Exactly.
which has any reference.
And did you see how Johnny Depp's demeanor changed a little bit? I think you mentioned it earlier. He could perked up a little bit, talks back a little bit more,
Lean forward into
a little
the
bit more
microphone.
impatient. And also Mr. Rottenborn's, is that how you say his name? Cut him off. He's not letting him talk for 10 minutes. These answers. That's purposeful and that's planned, and he's trying to gain control. It's all about who has control of Cross.
One nuance in this was that his side, Johnny Depp's side, used the online article, which was published clearly the day before the Washington Post printed article, which contained the phrase sexual violence in the headline. Yet the article which Ben Rottenborn showed to Johnny Depp didn't have the same headline, which I didn't know. And it takes the phrase sexual violence out of it. Now, I suspect there's something that could be made of that,
Oh,
but
purpose.
what's the tactic here?
It's on purpose. He also used this newspaper version in opening statements instead of the online article, which shows a very glamorous photo of Amber Heard at her premiere, and with that headline. And that's intentional because it looks more legitimate in the newspaper form as an op-ed than it does on the online version, right? As it's a web page.
So
it's all about
that's the
appearance.
reason for it, not the fact that the phrase sexual violence is not in that op-ed
Oh, I'm sure
headline.
that has to do with it too. Plus,
okay.
that title of the online version is one of the basis of defamation. The title is an issue here that this jury will have to consider whether or not that defames Johnny Depp. So they are kind of taking that out.
Because we ought to point out that the newspaper version has a much, I nearly said lamer,
General.
a much milder, generic kind
generic.
of title about rights for women rather than victims of sexual violence.
Right. So multi-purpose strategy there to show the newspaper version as opposed
Wheels
to the
within
online.
wheels.
And Johnny caught it right off.
Oh,
He said,
yeah.
This is the 19th. So.
Yeah. So we've just started the cross-examination. I presume you'd be surprised if it finished tomorrow.
I could see it possibly finishing tomorrow afternoon. But again, there's years that they go through, 2014, 2015, 2016. But the pace will be much quicker because, again, he's going to cut Johnny off. He's going to ask for yes or no answers, and it's going to be more contentious. So this is a really big test for Johnny Depp on how he handles the pressure. Now, you've seen him in the UK under Cross, but here I think it may be even more.
I have to say, he already, in the way that he's responded to the questions from Amber Heard's attorney, was much more on the front foot than it was in London. In London, he laid back, he answered the questions, he was super polite. I think, well, it didn't work for him in London, did it?
Right.
So maybe he's trying a different tactic here. Maybe it's because there's a jury and he thinks, or maybe he's just fed up with it all and wants to say what he wants to say. I don't know.
What else does he have to lose?
Well, this is the thing, and Ben Rottenborn is trying to make the point that he'd lost all his movie roles as a result of the domestic violence allegations, which he didn't act upon in 2016, and I think he's trying to say, well, this 2018 op-ed's for the birds, isn't he? And that's a real tactic that he's pushing already.
Right.
And
that goes to damages.
oh, does it?
Yes.
Okay, explain that then.
They
Explain
also
that.
have to prove damages in a civil suit. So not only was your reputation injured, but you lost something. But he's saying he lost movie roles and money, millions of dollars. That's why he's suing for $50 million. Yeah. So in the 100, that's a statement. I don't really think this is about money. This is personal, obviously.
Yeah, it's
but
reputation, isn't it?
The amount that you seek shows how important this is to you. And $50 million is a lot of money. Yeah. So that's why we heard testimony with him regarding what he lost, because they have to prove that.
Well, it was a really fascinating day, and I have to say it's the first day, I wouldn't say I enjoyed it, but because of the lack of interruption from the attorneys, and you got to build almost an atmosphere in the courtroom which was coming from the witnesses rather than the lawyers. Right. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about the process. Yes. I was actually thinking about the evidence and the the narrative that the witness was trying to get across. So it was an interesting day to be in court, wasn't it?
Oh, it absolutely was. And like I said, in the years being in courtrooms for Court TV, we've really never seen where a witness has been allowed to just have his day to the extent that you have 10-minute answers.
Yeah.
Without, usually the defense would object as non-responsive. That's the objection. If the witness does not directly answer the question asked, you object, and then the judge will ask them to move on. That's not happening here.
You've got me thinking, because I wonder whether this is a deal that they've cut to say, well, okay, we're going to let Amber Heard talk, or whether this is, like you say, a tactic, and we're going to see a very different way of cross-examining or examining Amber Heard.
Yes.
Well, we've got it all to come, haven't we? Another
We
4.5
do.
weeks of this.
Yes.
Chanley, thank you so much for coming on to the park bench outside court. I really do appreciate it. My thanks to Chanley Painter. Now, just time to tell you about a couple of quite strange things which happened today. The first was while I was sitting outside court, just coming up to the lunch hour, and a very earnest young man came up to me, and he told me his name is Michael, and he told me that he was sent by God to travel the world, saving people and warning them about the Antichrist who walks amongst us. He knows the name of the Antichrist, and he told me who it was. And I can tell you who the Antichrist is. It's, drum roll please, Jared Leto. Jared Leto is apparently the Antichrist, according to Michael, who seemed like a very reasonable, if earnest, young man, although I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, he's given me a book. Take a look at this book. This is the book which draws all the dots together and proves to Michael, and who knows, perhaps growing numbers of people, that Jared Leto is the Antichrist. I'm not very sure. I'm not sure he is. I don't think you are, Mr. Leto. But I haven't read the book yet. What else happened? Oh yeah, I got outside of court to interview Chanley Painter on the park bench and was waylaid by an enormous rabbit. I'm not joking. Here she is. We had alpacas earlier this week, which I didn't get to see, but the fauna that is descending upon Fairfax County Court is quite something. And this enormous rabbit, called Lil Babe, I believe, was being kept by a man, but ownership was claimed by a lady. So I interviewed the owner of the rabbit to see why she'd brought her down to court.
Well, she's my rabbit, and I have to bring her with me wherever I go, so she's in Virginia now.
She's attracting a lot of attention.
I mean, she's a popular rabbit, you know. Hopefully she'll bring awareness to this case. To other rabbits, possibly.
Is she a symbolic rabbit of any?
I mean, she's actually a meat rabbit. I actually got her on Craigslist, sold as a meat rabbit.
She's a rescue rabbit.
Grow your own lean protein in your apartment type thing.
Would you eat her?
Would I eat her? I'm not. I'm vegetarian, but no, I don't think so.
And just why again did you bring her along today?
Because I bring her everywhere. Oops.
And you were in court watching what was going on, so you brought your rabbit?
Yeah, I have to bring her. I bring her everywhere.
And you also brought a handler as well.
Yeah, well, that's helpful.
Chauffeur rabbit handler.
But hey, that definitely helps because she likes to free range. I don't think do you think I could bring her into the courtroom?
They're pretty strict on lots of things, but I didn't see anything in the judge's court order about rabbits.
I mean, maybe it's worth a try.
There we go, the hot rabbit news outside court here in Virginia. Thank you very much for participating in this episode of Reporting Depp v. Heard. If you would like to support my work, I'd be enormously grateful. All you have to do is go to reportingdeppvheard.net/newsletter and make a one-time only donation. I've been told that one-off doesn't make any sense in America, so if you make a one-time only donation to get the newsletter, which you will every day after court, and it would also help power my reporting on YouTube and on the Reporting Depp v. Heard podcast. We will have another full day of Johnny Depp, this time being cross-examined by Amber Heard's attorney over the course of 7 hours in Court 5J from Fairfax County Court. But from the court and from me, for now, goodbye.